I swear, some moments in life are so utterly surreal. They feel like they're happening to someone else. Or maybe you're just watching a particularly poorly written play unfold before your eyes. This was one of those moments. I was standing there at my parents' annual summer BBQ, the smell of burnt hot dogs and cheap beer assaulting my senses, when my sister, Sarah, walked up to me. She had that saccharine sweet yet utterly venomous smile plastered across her face, the one she usually reserved for our grandmother's funeral when she was angling for extra sympathy. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man, tall and impeccably dressed, a stark contrast to the mismatched Hawaiian shirts and faded cargo shorts that made up the usual family attire. He had a quiet intensity about him, the kind that made you feel like he was observing everything, even the tiny flecks of sauce on your shirt. Sarah, with a dramatic flourish of her hand that nearly knocked over my lukewarm soda, announced, "And this, Mark, is the failure of our family." My parents, who had just joined us, Bella laughed. Not a polite chuckle, mind you, but a full-throated, unashamed guffaw, their heads nodding in agreement, as if Sarah had just delivered the punchline to the funniest joke in human history. The air, already thick with humidity, suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. Even the incessant clinking of glasses and the cacophony of distant family chatter seemed to dim, replaced by a deafening silence. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears, and the sound of my own heart shattering into a million pieces. The man Mark just stood there, his gaze unwavering, taking it all in, and then he smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, and he said, "Well, I'll get to that. But tell me, was I wrong for what I did next?" Would you have just stood there and taken it? Let me take you back a bit, so you can understand just how this moment came to be, and why Sarah's words and my parents' reaction cut so deep. My name is Alex, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the black sheep, the disappointment, the creative, one in a family of fiercely pragmatic, financially driven people. My sister, Sarah, on the other hand, was the golden child. Straight A's, prestigious university, impressive corporate job right out of college. She ticked every single box our parents had. She was everything I wasn't. While she was climbing the corporate ladder, I was, to their exasperation, pursuing a career in graphic design and illustration. It wasn't a conventional path, and for years it was a struggle. There were lean times, ramen noodle diets, and endless nights spent hunched over my drawing tablet, trying to make ends meet and build a portfolio. My parents, bless their hearts, saw this as a personal failing. Every family gathering became an interrogation. "Are you still doing that art thing, Alex?" my dad would ask, his voice dripping with condescension. "When are you going to get a real job like Sarah?" My mother would chime in, as if I were deliberately choosing poverty over prosperity. Sarah, of course, reveled in it. She'd offer unsolicited career advice, always prefacing it with, "You know, if you were just a little more realistic, Alex. Or it's not too late to go back to school for something practical." Her words were always coated in a faux concern that barely masked her smug superiority. I tried to explain my passion, my vision, the hours of work I put in, the small victories, but it always fell on deaf ears. To them, if it wasn't a corporate salary with benefits and a 401k, it wasn't success. My relationship with Sarah had always been strained, a constant competition I never asked to be a part of. She was always trying to outshine me, even in things I didn't care about. If I got a good grade, she'd get a better one. If I showed a drawing to our parents, she'd present a perfect financial report from a simulated stock market game. It was exhausting. As we grew older, her subtle digs turned into outright mockery, especially once I chose my artistic path. She'd tell extended family members with me standing right there how I was struggling, and how she was helping me out by giving me odd jobs designing flyers for her company's internal events, as if I was some kind of charity case. not a professional with my own clients. My parents never intervened, always siding with Sarah, believing her entrepreneurial spirit was a testament to her superiority. They loved to tell the story of how Sarah, at age 10, started a lemonade stand that made real money, while I, at the same age, spent my allowance on art supplies. This narrative, the Sarah the success versus Alex the failure, became the bedrock of our family dynamic. Things had been particularly tense leading up to that fateful BBQ. I had recently landed a pretty significant freelance gig, a dream project for a major tech company. I was bursting with pride and excitement, but I knew better than to share the full details with my family. I'd learned long ago that my successes were either dismissed as flukes or met with backhanded compliments. So, when my mom called to invite me to the BBQ, I kept it vague. "Things are going well, Mom. Busy with a new client." She didn't press, probably assuming busy meant I was still drawing pictures for local cafes. Sarah, however, seemed to know. She had a way of sniffing out any hint of good news in my life, like a bloodhound on a fresh trail, just so she could stomp all over it. I suspected she had been eavesdropping on a phone call, or more likely, snooping through my social media. Whatever the source, she was clearly armed with information she intended to weaponize. The BBQ itself was a blur of forced smiles and awkward conversations. I tried to lay low, sticking to the periphery, nursing my drink, and making small talk with my aunts and uncles who, at least, were mostly benign in their inquiries. I saw Sarah fluttering around, charming everyone, particularly the man I later learned was her boss, Mark. She was clearly trying to impress him, showcasing her perfect family, her perfect life. I remember thinking, poor guy, he has no idea what he's gotten himself into. I watched her guide him through the various clusters of relatives, introducing him with an air of proprietorship. I knew it was only a matter of time before she zeroed in on me. I tried to prepare myself for the inevitable onslaught of thinly veiled insults and condescending remarks. I rehearsed my polite, noncommittal answers, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the sheer brutality of her introduction. So, that's the situation I was in, standing there, the heat of the summer sun battling the icy chill that had just spread through my veins. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had just introduced me as the failure of our family, to her boss, a man I'd just met. And my parents, the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, had not only agreed but had laughed. A genuine, joyful laugh. It was a moment of profound betrayal, a culmination of years of being belittled, dismissed, and openly mocked. I felt exposed, humiliated, and utterly alone. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air, to rewind time and never set foot in that backyard. My mind was racing, trying to process the sheer audacity, the deliberate cruelty of it all. What do you do in that situation? Do you lash out? Do you cry? Do you just walk away? Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Seriously, put yourself in my place. What's your gut reaction? My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand an explanation, but my throat felt constricted. All I could do was stare, my eyes probably wide with shock and hurt. Sarah was beaming, clearly pleased with herself, while my parents continued to chuckle, oblivious to the emotional carnage they had just inflicted. And then there was Mark, the man who had been silently observing the whole exchange. He was still standing there, his gaze fixed on me, an unreadable expression on his face. And then, as I mentioned, he smiled, faintly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a mocking smile or a sympathetic one. It was knowing, and he said, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the stunned silence that had fallen over our small group. "Alex, isn't it? I'm Mark. Sarah has mentioned you." He extended a hand, and I, still reeling, automatically took it. His grip was firm, confident. My parents and Sarah finally stopped their private celebration and looked at him, slightly confused by his unexpected intervention. "She mentioned you'd be here," he continued, still looking at me, his smile broadening ever so slightly. "Actually, I've been meaning to meet you. I'm quite a fan of your work, particularly your recent redesign project for Apex Innovations." The words hit me like a physical blow, but not one of pain. It was like a sudden, unexpected gust of wind that clears away all the fog and brings everything into sharp focus. My jaw must have dropped. Sarah's triumphant grin instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. My parents, who had just been laughing at my supposed failure, now looked utterly bewildered, their mouths slightly agape. Apex Innovations, that was the major tech company, the dream project I had been working on, the one I had kept vague to avoid their scrutiny. Mark was her boss. He was the asterisk boss, the CEO of Apex Innovations, the man she was trying so desperately to impress. And he knew about my work. He was a fan. I could feel a slow, incredulous smile spreading across my own face, a smile that mirrored the one on Mark's. You know about that project?" I stammered, still trying to process the surreal turn of events. He chuckled. "I know about it, Alex. You practically saved our marketing department. The creative direction you brought to the Apex relaunch campaign was nothing short of brilliant. We've seen a significant increase in engagement and positive feedback since its implementation. Everyone's been talking about it. My marketing director couldn't stop raving about your professionalism and innovative approach." He then turned his gaze to Sarah, who looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon whole. "In fact, Sarah, when I heard Alex was your brother, I was quite impressed. What a talented family you have." Sarah was speechless. Her face was a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, embarrassment, fury, and a dawning realization of the catastrophic miscalculation she had just made. My parents, too, were looking between Mark and me with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. They had spent years ridiculing my artistic pursuits, and now the CEO of the prestigious company Sarah worked for, the company they so admired, was praising my art thing to the heavens. Mark, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, didn't let up. He turned back to me, completely ignoring Sarah and my parents, and continued, "Alex, I was actually hoping to chat with you a bit more about your process. We're always looking for innovative talent, and I'm curious if you'd be open to discussing a more permanent role, or at least a long-term retainer with us. We have some exciting projects coming up that I think would be a perfect fit for your unique vision." He said it right there, in front of everyone. A permanent role with Apex Innovations, the company Sarah had slaved away at for years, clawing her way up the corporate ladder. The company whose very name was synonymous with success in our family. My parents' eyes were practically bulging out of their sockets. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with unspoken words and shattered illusions. Sarah, still pale, finally managed to stammer, "But he's just a freelance artist." Mark raised an eyebrow, a hint of steel in his voice. "Sarah, just a freelance artist is precisely why he's so valuable. He brings a fresh perspective, an unconstrained creativity that can be stifled in a traditional corporate environment, and his results speak for themselves. You, of all people, should know the impact he's had on our recent campaign." The "you, of all people," landed like a direct hit. Sarah looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. My parents, still processing the complete reversal of fortune, stood there, deflated. The air was no longer heavy with my humiliation, but with their own. I saw the dawning realization in their eyes: the years of dismissiveness, the constant belittling, the overt favoritism towards Sarah. All had been based on a false narrative. The failure of our family was being offered a potentially career-defining opportunity by the CEO of their golden child's company, while said golden child stood there, utterly exposed. The rest of the BBQ was a blur. My parents stammered out apologies, fumbling for words, trying to backtrack and praise my talent. Sarah disappeared shortly after, claiming a sudden headache. Mark, however, stayed and genuinely chatted with me for another hour, discussing design principles, future trends, and the potential collaboration with Apex. He wasn't just being polite, he was genuinely interested. It was a conversation I had always yearned to have with my own family, a conversation where my work was respected and valued, not ridiculed. By the time he left, promising to have his assistant schedule a formal meeting, I felt an exhilarating mix of vindication and a strange, quiet sense of peace. The aftermath was interesting. My parents tried desperately to mend fences, showering me with belated praise and apologies. They even offered to invest in my art business, a thinly veiled attempt to claim some credit for my success. I politely declined, letting them know that I was doing just fine on my own. Sarah and I didn't speak for weeks. When she finally did call, her voice was strained. She didn't apologize, not directly, but the edge of superiority was gone, replaced by a grudging respect, or perhaps just resignation. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The failure had proven himself not by conforming to their expectations, but by excelling in his own chosen path, and in a way that, ironically, garnered the approval of the very people they admired. It was a bitter pill for them to swallow, but for me, it was the sweetest revenge. The quiet smile from Mark, the simple words of acknowledgement, had been more powerful than any shouting match or dramatic confrontation. It had stripped away years of their prejudiced judgment and exposed the truth. So that's my story. It was a moment that redefined my relationship with my family and solidified my own belief in my choices. It taught me that validation doesn't come from those who refuse to see your worth, but from the quiet confidence of pursuing your passion, even when others mock it. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe has a way of delivering justice in the most unexpected and satisfying ways. Like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'll see you all in the next story.